always curious about Islam from the time I read the last chapter of the autobiography of Malcolm X. During that time, I was a junior in high school. That's about 1967. And, I was going through a self-realization process of being proud of my blackness, my Africanness, my roots, as a lot of young African Americans were at that time. At 1967, I was 17. And I remember when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X at the encouragement of my mother, who had felt that Malcolm X was a bad man because he hated white people. When we read that last chapter where he went to Mecca and he changed his stance, that always stuck with me. So through my search for the truth, becoming a part of the Black Panther Party, becoming a big advocate of the Pan-African movement, and basically student activism and community activism even after college, I just, quite naturally it put me in circles where there was a lot of Afrocentric culture and Muslims. Some members of the Islamic Party, when I was at Ohio State student teaching, approached me about Islam. And I remember saying sarcastically, "What do you mean the hellfire? We get no hell right now here on earth." So I was kind of sarcastic, and I felt at that time that the Arabs helped to enslave my African ancestors as well as other Africans and Europeans. So I wasn't feeling the Arab thing too much, although I preferred them over to some other people. So anyway, eventually in my search, as I came out of college, came out of graduate school, I'm 23 years old, 24 years old, still searching for something that would be futuristic for myself and for any family that I might become a part of or help form. Because at that point I was still single and just dating people and going to parties and rallies and stuff like that. Eventually I went to Greenhaven Correctional Facility in Stormville, New York. And I remember when I went up there, there were inmates from the Nation of Islam, the traditional Nation of Islam. And there were brothers that were walking around with white kufis on their head. Well, I was always attracted to brothers that had those either red, black, and green kufis, and they had beards, and they always seemed like they had something on their mind. So I spoke to a brother and I asked him what the difference was between Orthodox Islam and the Nation of Islam. He told me to come up the very next day and he would explain. I used somebody's ID. I went right back up to Stormville, New York, which is about a 3-hour bus ride from 125th Street. I wasn't driving at the time. And I went and I spoke to this brother named Jalil. And he was an inmate. He was back on a parole violation. And I met all these brothers up there and their wives who were visiting them. And that was when I really started seriously thinking about Islam. They sent me to Yasin Masjid. I got my first Quran 6 months before I took my Shahada. The Quran still stays in my bedroom. I used Yusuf Ali translation. So this is the very first Quran that I purchased in my life. I went by Yasin Masjid, 52 Herkimer Place in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Didn't know very little about Bed-Stuy. I was from Queens. And I went by there and I asked the brothers, I said, I need to buy a Quran. Of course, they were tickled. I was a nice looking young woman and they was always looking for other wives. So they very much obliged when they asked me how was I interested in Islam, and I told them I was visiting a brother that was in the prison. Anyway, this is my very first Quran that you can see is well worn and well used. I bought this, like I said, the fall of 1974. I became Muslim in March of 75. So after, going through some of the Quran, reading a couple biographies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and hanging with sisters when I was going back and forth and meeting some other sisters. And then I had a couple of good friends, like my friend Dawud Hud, Ismail Granville, people I grew up with, when I went to high school with. And they too seemed like all the heavy duties, like my friend Benny would say, it's like all the heavy duties eventually become Muslim. So it really had me reflecting and thinking very seriously. And the more I read and the more I investigated, the more it began to appeal to me, even though I had issues about covering, issues about not boogieing down or partying no more. and definitely issues about having to be celibate until marriage. But I definitely felt that I was on a search. Little did I know the job I had at 56 Court Street, pretrial services, was exactly 3 blocks down from State Street, 143 State Street, where Sheikh Dawood, the late Sheikh Dawood, and his wife, the late Mother Khadija, would befriend me, and I would become friends with them about a year later. So, and then I had a place to go to Juma right from my job. Allah is the best of planners. Surely He knew what I knew not. And that's basically what happened. And then the imam at the inmate masjid called Sankore Masjid, which was named after the big great Sankore Masjid in Timbuktu. They had a masjid they called Sankore that I guess the prison administration allowed them to have for special events. And I went up there on the celebration of the Prophet's birthday. They called the Mawlid. I went up there on March 23rd, 1975, and although many, many times as on my visits, these brothers would say, "Sister, Shahada, are you going to take Shahada?" And I wasn't ready. And then Imam Rasul, who I found out later was one of Al-Hajj Malik's right-hand men, Imam Rasul, a.k.a. Robert 35X, a.k.a. Karate Bob, was the imam there. And I had become friends with his wife, now the late Hagar. And he talked about it. He gave a talk about the grave and about the Day of Judgment, and somehow or other it really shook me up. Even though the night before I'd been to a party, I still, when I heard that talk about the grave, I remember thinking maybe I should give this Islam a try. I thought to myself, well, I can always get out of this if I want to. I don't have to stay in this. But I knew whatever I did, Islam was something serious. I didn't want to do it for a man. I didn't want to do it as a fad. I was somebody that always had to be true to myself. So finally I put my hand up and I said I was ready to take my Shahada. And it shocked everybody. My friend Lenore, I think her name was Kanora at the time, she took me to the bathroom, showed me how to make wudu, and I remember sitting up there saying, Ashadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasuluh, and saying the English translation, being witness that there's only one God, Allah, and that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, son of Abdullah and Amina, is his last servant and last apostle with the message. And then he told me to put my hand in the Quran. I came up on something saying Amin, so he said, well, that's Amin, you might look well for yourself, Amina, and that was pretty close towards you, letter A. And then I put my hand back in the Quran and I touched the word Haqq, and that's how I got my Islamic name, Amina Amatul Haqq. And I went to my job. That was like on a Sunday. The next day I went to my job with a long skirt and a gay leg, which we call a African head wrap on my head. I wasn't ready to wear the kimar at the time. And people looked at me kind of strange. And little by little they got the message that I had changed. I had embraced a new lifestyle. Came with trials and tests, but that was my search for truth.